Happy New Year. Good to see you. And yeah, I don't even know where to start with all this. I mean, it's like we're not even a week into the new year, and you had, what was it, 10 people killed in New Orleans. Then you had the Cybertruck in Vegas, the shooting in the Bronx, and now everything is focusing on the Cybertruck in Las Vegas. So, what was your initial reaction when you first heard of? I mean, well, here, let's just go back up a second. What was your first reaction when you heard of the New Orleans incident?
Um, I don't watch the news, and unless something pops up on X or Twitter, which through the holidays don't tend to keep up on quite as much. So I actually heard about the Cybertruck before the New Orleans. Um, too many. The one thing that really stands out with the New Orleans is that the barriers weren't in place. And they can make whatever argument they want, but if you can't have the barriers, what you do is you put police vehicles, sideways in the street to block the streets. It's simple and easy. So, I don't want to over speculate. But um, if you are narrative crafting a 2001 like threat, where we need to go to holy war with the Middle East again, let's say the second 21st century crusade, um, you'd have to have events like what just happened in New Orleans, and you'd have to do subtle little things like the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt on the president, where you have incompetence in layers, and incompetence in layers is intent.
Yeah, and the thing too with the New Orleans, everybody's talking about Vegas, and I know we're gonna speak about that, but no one the New Orleans thing, the fact that you had all those fatalities. Plus, it's New Year's Eve. The Sugar Bowl was supposed to happen New Year's Day. I mean, there's a lot going on there. And now, in all fairness, I've never been there. I've never really had a desire to go there, to be honest with you. But because it just looks filthy to me. I'll probably get some.
My parents used to live right around the corner from there.
Oh, so you know that area well.
I don't know it well, but that was before I came around. But my parents met there actually on Bourbon Street, and gosh, sometime in the 1970s. My adopted parents.
But so you've been there though. I mean,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. 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 I've been right by that area.
And the other thing with that too is, but nobody's talking about that. Everything is focused on Vegas.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you don't get much narrative progress from an Islamic, terrorist attack. A team sergeant Green Beret with a lot of operational time and experience and cross IC community kind of work, et cetera, and who is currently active, you get a lot of narrative progress with that one. And you can take that narrative progress, so I don't know if you're familiar with alternate reality games.
What's narrative progress mean? Yeah,
Well, that's where, okay, so I'll articulate it. So there's this thing out there called alternate reality games, and I don't know if you're familiar with.
I'm not. Explain this to me like I'm 5.
Well, as a 6-year-old, I can only explain it, not much better than a 5-year-old. Um, an alternate reality game is a game that blends online engagement, interaction with things out in the real world, and it really blurs the lines between reality and game. And some of them have been going on for a decade, decade and a half. They're very sophisticated. They're very clever. Major brands and corporations will often do an alternate reality game as a product brand launch. Brilliant stuff that folks are doing. Well, for all intents and purposes, that's what fifth generation warfare is. It comes from the alternate reality game space. Um, the game has some basic, there's some things you're trying to accomplish. There's some outcomes you're trying to accomplish. You're seeding certain things in the information space to keep the gameplay going, to keep people on track, etc. But you're letting gameplay and the players direct the game. So if you want a thought about it, I don't know if you ever played Mass Effect, one of my favorite video games.
Was that
And there's
Atari?
others, but
Is that Atari?
no. This is
Arcade?
PlayStation and Xbox, I think.
Oh.
I played it on Xbox, but I think it's PlayStation as well. But in Mass Effect, it's a play directed game. So you're making decisions and then you're going down decision trees, and that's determining the future gameplay for you. We've been designing these and building these for quite some time. Sid Meier's Civilization games, which are ludicrously sophisticated, and Tom Luongo would probably know about those as he's a game player guy. But the point being is that you have an intended outcome, winning the game, right? And in some of these cases, the alternate reality games, there is no winning. It's just you're completing a sophisticated, complex phase, and then the game evolves to what's the next major thing that we're all trying to play and accomplish. And in many ways, that's really kind of how life works too, corporations, et cetera, et cetera. But the point being is that the narrative progress is players picking up on subtle little cues and then playing those out, right? Chasing down. So you got your QAnon folks, you got your conspiracy theory folks, you got your folks that actually do understand the conspiracies, you got the folks involved in conspiracies. And again, as a Green Beret, I was sent to school by the government to do conspiracies. That's what unconventional warfare is. It's what the CIA and the non-analyst CIA paramilitary and operational guys are. They are people who do conspiracies all over the world. But the point is that in order to get to the outcome that you want, which is in this case shaping public opinion or shaping the opinions of the certain subsets of the population that you're trying to achieve, or you're trying to reach, you have to keep that narrative moving. You have to keep it progressing. You're not feeding it all, but you know who's going to pick up on what little cues and who's going to chase what, and then you just seed. I don't know if you know what Jade Helm is, but Jade Helm was I don't know if they're still doing it, by the way, but Jade Helm was a big Special Forces Green Berets training exercise that we did across a whole bunch of states. And that's what we did. We were playing a big alternate reality game, unconventional warfare game, where we're simulating the overthrow of a country from, external and internal to that country. And I might or might not have written a lane and run it. But what you do in these types of things, these big exercises, is you feed intel injects to keep the elements on track, but also to kind of guide them a bit of where you want them to go with their own decisions, their own thinking, planning, etc. So with an Islamic friendly terrorist, or even the appearance of one, because we don't know the guy in New Orleans was actually that. We don't know that he wasn't a patsy, et cetera. So, because all that seems staged afterwards, the lady in the yoga pants doing going into the frickin' place, et cetera. It's ludicrous, it's totally staged. But point being is, with that, you don't get a lot of narrative push and movement. You're not going to motivate certain communities to get involved. And in particular, you're not going to get the special forces community, special operations community, which is so jaded and so exhausted. You're not going to get them committed to another jihad, another frickin' war, massive war in the Middle East. It's not going to happen. I mean, you're going to get some.
I see, Ian. Let me interrupt you. I would think the opposite. Being obviously just being a civilian, but I would think it would motivate people, because if you're using the ploy of, it's a jihadist that did this in New Orleans, let's get them.
We fought them for 20 years. We fought them for 20 years. We killed millions of people in frickin' Middle East and elsewhere. Millions. Didn't change a damn thing. And we just use fucking ISIS, excuse my language. We just use fucking ISIS to overthrow a country. ISIS and Al Qaeda. So, what the hell did we accomplish in 20 years of war on terror? The only thing it appears is that either we were actually fighting ourselves for 20 years, special operations community fighting the intelligence community through all these cutouts to include nations, so that we could fund the mob state, the Praetorian regime, and at the point of a gun, force peoples around the world to keep buying our bad debt. Or we totally and utterly and absolutely failed in our mission to such a point to where our intelligence community and the overlap, the special operations community, is utilizing the terrorist. We took total and absolute control of the terrorist organizations. We didn't get rid of them. We just assumed command. And now we're using them around the world. Well, you're not going to get a whole lot of special operations guys want any part of that anymore. We've seen too many people dead, killed too many people. We've had too many of our own kill themselves because of when they realize what the hell they've been doing. When you see through the lie and you realize you've killed all kinds of people for no reason. And we got our psychopaths too, right? We recruit for them. It's not that all special operations guys are. We're paramilitary guys, the CIA predominantly, and I've known way more than one of those close, right? But we do select for sociopathy and special operations. It's the only way to get the job done.
So okay, so going into the Vegas side of it, how does that motivate? How will that drive reaction?
Well, I think you get two sides there. Okay, so let me step back a little bit, okay? And forgive me, I've had a little bit of coffee just before we talk, so I'm a little more amped up than I normally am. Give me a second. What I suspect is that this is two parts of the same operation. One part is to see what kind of reaction we get to the latest Islamic terrorist attack on American soil. Let's see what kind of narrative progress that gets us. Okay. And that feeds into the, Sarah Adams, whatever the hell her name is, whatever that freaking CIA asset is that's, intentionally went on Sean Ryan's show to narrative craft, anyways, I couldn't even finish watching the show. It annoyed me.
Okay,
it angered me, actually.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask you what your thoughts were when you watched that.
Total predictive programming. Total, complete, absolute predictive programming.
For people that don't understand what that means, predictive programming, like
telling you what they're going to do so that when it and who's behind it, so that when they do it, when we do it, we look to them, not to us. It's predictive programming. I'm telling you it's going to happen, but I want you to blame them, not us. Right? So I got to tell you ahead of time that the threat's there. Otherwise, when it happens, I might look at, we might look at our own and go, wait a second. Right? So I suspect this was two sides of the same operation. One was to see what kind of legs a Islamic terrorist attack would have. And the other one is what kind of legs a special operations and, Green Beret in particular, because that's got to be specifically Green Berets because of our mission. Potential white supremacists, which one of those is going to stick with the populists so that when you do your false flag later on, who knows, any day, like we were saying before we started recording, it could happen, shit could kick off at any minute.
This conversation could be old by the time it goes up a couple hours later.
By the time we're done with the freaking conversation.
Well, that's why I keep looking at my phone. I don't want you to think I'm rude, but I'm like looking because you know what? God only knows what could happen between now and then.
Yeah. So they've been laying the groundwork, the predictive programming for both white supremacy, military. This is General Milley, freaking traitor. And I hate to say former Green Beret, but he is. This was Milley's thing about white race. So you got to, take all this, go back over the last 3-4 years and really before, but 3-4 years. And look what was the narrative crafting, the little narrative seeds that were put out there. Because when it kicks off, they don't care who we unleash our rage on. They don't care. So they'll seed 4 or 5 different folks, countries, nations, organizations, ethnicities, or whatever. They don't care. Once the rage kicks off, though, they want to channel it against somebody that isn't them. It's what you do. It's what we do in unconventional warfare in a country. Steadily build things up, narrative craft, right? We don't know exactly who we're going to put in positions of power, etc. We don't know exactly how it's going to go, but we're going to overthrow your government. We're going to completely suborn the will of your people.
So, okay. So there's different narratives that have been put out right now. Special forces, white supremacists. Did he say in his manifesto he's a white supremacist?
No, but there was in the early comments before the quote unquote manifesto, which I don't believe in at all. I would say I have very low confidence. I don't want to say I don't believe in it at all, but I have very low confidence. There were statements early on in the early suppositions that it was white supremacy, and it was a side comment somewhere. I don't remember. It was something on Twitter, went around Twitter real fast. Then you've got another narrative, which is the disgruntled veteran over war crimes. And by the way, the discrediting of the Green Berets in particular, happened in the 1970s. I watched it as a kid in the late 60s and early 70s. And it happened very much for the same reason. We have to remember there was terrorist attacks happening in the United States, domestic terrorist attacks by communists or Marxists mostly, right, and anarchists. Give me a second. There was rising anger and rage over the war and the realization that the war in Vietnam was a lie. And that we were, a lot of the similarity stuff with the GWAT, they were losing the few men that you have that volunteered for the hardest work, the hardest, most dangerous, most self-destructive work in the world, were becoming disillusioned in the late 60s, early 70s around Vietnam War and around everything that was happening and the post-Kennedy assassinations and how all that happened and the Church report later. But point is that the same thing happened in the late 60s and 70s, which was the discrediting of the Green Beret community. Because if you're going to have a civil war, guess who's probably going to lead it? At least not the big, et cetera, but at the local level, who would get involved at protecting their local communities and who would have the capacity to do it. And then maybe, heaven forbid, and I'm not saying that this is in any form or fashion, anybody I'm talking to wants any part of this, right? But there is one community in this country that is specifically trained to conduct civil war, to initiate them, to launch them, to cover every aspect of it in enemy territory. It's the Green Berets. It's what we were founded for. So if you are concerned with a civil war, what do you have to do? What is the one community you have to discredit? And this happened earlier, that idiot that went down and did the Venezuela thing, the former 18 Delta, who got suckered into doing that like an idiot. Right? So with the Matt Livelsberger 18 Zulu thing, I don't know exactly what's going on there. That's quite honest. I don't know exactly what's going on there. What I do know is the narrative crafting, right? The little narrative progress across many different dimensions that's being played out that's setting up future things. If the regime, and I'll use the Sean Ryan thing, I cannot but believe, and I posted on this yesterday, that entire interview was actually about predictive programming a strike on a U.S. aircraft, probably Trump's, because that's all the messaging, using Iranian equipment. Basically telling us they're going to do it. Now, they might not succeed, in which case then they're going to have to deal with the blowback and the rage that comes from that. And they're going to have to, because then they don't get their Iranian war, and then they're going to have to channel the fight, the civil war, as per our last conversation, what I'm concerned with. They're going to have to channel it in other ways, direct that rage and that anger elsewhere, domestically. And then you get this idiot on MSNBC today who's a total, slug mouthpiece for the psyop state, the mob state, and he's saying that the greatest threat to America is the U.S. Army.
Who was that? Yeah.
I don't remember his name. I forwarded up some MSNBC.
Did you post it?
I did. Yeah.
Did you post it on X?
Yeah.
I'm gonna look for it real quick while you're talking.
QT'd it.
Oh.
Right. Well, that comes from this, vehicle, this event in Las Vegas. And again, back in the late 1960s, early 1970s, there's these same conversations, because at that time there was genuine concern that we were going to have a revolution in the United States. Remember the violence on campus and, the Kent State stuff. And again, we had all kinds of domestic terrorists, many of which were brought into the Obama White House or into the circle around Obama and have been praised and given freedom medals and everything else.
Lawrence O'Donnell is the from MSNBC.
Yeah, I didn't even know his name. I never watched that channel, but it popped up, and I saw the biggest threat we got is the U.S. military. Okay, well, that's narrative crafting. The thing in New Orleans wouldn't have got us that specific, avenue for alternate reality gameplay, fifth generation warfare gameplay wouldn't have happened without, the Team Sergeant event in Vegas.
I had somebody call me this morning, and we were talking about this, and I said, I can't even get my head around it, because, all right, so he rents a Cybertruck in Colorado, drives down to Vegas, right in front of the Trump Tower, the Trump Hotel. It's a very nice hotel, by the way.
Yeah, I used to live in Vegas.
And sets it on fire. Is in the car. He's in the truck, and then takes his own life while he's in the truck.
I don't know. I'm not going to say that I'm a ballistics expert or a demolition expert. I wasn't an 18 Charlie, and I'm not a breach, a certified breacher like my buddy Clay is. These types of things. So I'm not a weapons expert like some other guys I know. I will say that just a whole lot of it doesn't make sense. And I get it, if a guy's gone off the rails, cognitive, PTSD, brain injuries, boy, we've got a lot of it in our community, brain injury specifically, because you don't have PTSD without having underlying physical structural brain injuries. Then you might get some erratic behavior, and maybe he was falling on his sword to draw attention to, to war crimes and in general to the fact that we've just been slaughtering people for no reason. And we just used the very terrorist organizations that, we've been fighting against for over 20 years all over the world, killing millions of fucking people. We just used them to overthrow a country.
With a $10 million bounty that was lifted on the leader in America, and people.
Right. So, I mean, it's possible he went, that he just, it was it. He snapped. It's not probable. It's not even remotely probable. And the one thing that keeps sticking in my mind is a Desert Eagle 45, when it goes off, it flashes. That is a loud frickin' bang, and it flashes. 50 caliber Desert Eagle. None of that's on camera. And where's the first minutes of the video? Right? So again, I'm not a detective, I was an intel analyst, targeting and specific, right? But there's just too much there we don't know. And I'll tell you honestly, And maybe this is just me, uh, growing up with Green Berets and growing up with Green Beret stories and going on later in life and becoming one. And, you know, uh, some part of me wants to believe that's somebody else's body. Some part of me wants to believe that's the FBI hitman, the Sicario that was sent out to kill him, uh, that he killed, threw in the vehicle, burned up, put it on auto nav, and he's somewhere down in uh, in Mexico with the Shawshank Redemption guys, right? Some part of me wants to just believe that, and yeah, it could be true, right? The other part could be true is that he's in on the operation, and that is somebody else's body in that vehicle. Whose the news has already come out, the law enforcement has already come out and said the DNA doesn't match his child.
Wait, so you think it could be somebody else?
Could be.
Wouldn't surprise
Totally.
you?
No, not at all.
So then who? So Livsberger was who then in this
He was
scenario?
team sergeant in 10th group.
No, no, no. But I mean, okay, if it's somebody else that killed him and put, so you're saying,
So the FBI, somebody from the state, the deep state, could have killed him, the mob state, and thrown his body in there, and then put it on auto navigate and got it there, and remotely detonated. Or it could be somebody completely different than him altogether, which he could have done himself, or he could have done with some help
just to fit the narrative.
to fit the narrative, to feed the game, to move the narrative forward, and to feed the next, you know, to initiate the next phase in gameplay.
What, in your view, is the next phase? If we're playing Clue here, this, you know what this reminds me of, EM, and somebody pointed this out a long time ago. It's like one big monopoly board. This whole thing. Instead of railroads, it's gas. That's what Syria, right? Natural gas, natural.
I don't know that. Yeah. So give me a second. I While the collateral is a major issue, right? Our whole financial system, our entire Western system is based off of collateral, and we don't have any more good collateral to pump up, to justify additional lending to keep the Ponzi scheme going. And so it's an easy argument to say gas and oil and so all that, but not really, not really. Um, as I wrote about in the Eternal War, and I spent decades thinking about, and it's particularly when I was doing targeting with C11. Um, there's there's two things that are overlapped here. One, we've got about 30% of the population that just lives off of lies, deceit, and crime. And maybe only 2 or 3% of them are in prison or on the street. The rest of them are wearing suits and are in government and bureaucracy and banks and you know businesses and then we've got maybe 4%, three to maybe less than that. Maybe it's about 1%, the one percenters that are fighters. We like to fight, you know, we like to hunt people down and kill them. And that's about 1%. That's all you need, right? 1 to 3%, you're in control. And when you have those two together, you have a mob state. You're just out robbing and stealing and killing because that's what you want to do. And you got to use these other arguments and excuses because if not, then populist turns against you and you get an immune system response from civilization and humanity. So it's easy to make the argument that it's over oil or gas. It's not very realistic. Might have been, 100 years ago, 80 years ago when we hadn't discovered, engineering wise and technologically, we hadn't advanced to the point where we found that we've got oil and gas all over the frickin' world in far greater volumes than we ever imagined. And we can afford to get to it now. So maybe 100 years ago that was a valid argument, but now it's not. Now it's just the folks who own the financial system have to keep the Ponzi scheme going, so they let the 31% that are out there just killing and robbing and stealing do their thing. But they got to carefully keep them, oriented. Got to keep them focused over there, out there.
Do you think we're at the end of the line here with the financial
Yes.
Ponzi scheme?
Yeah. 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 I think one, there's people have talked about all kinds of this in far greater detail, but yeah, we're at the end of it. The real serious issue is that we cannot genuinely, truly force project anymore. And the thing that the internet did, not initially, but really over the last 10 years, the thing that the internet did is it allowed, particularly social media, the vast majority of our ability to force project was our ability to narrative craft. It was our ability to maintain the artificial reality of our superiority, our strength, our dominance, our victories, etc., when none of that was actually true. And now we can't hide it anymore. We can't hide the fact that it's not true anymore. And so we're at the end of the rope of this manipulation, this deception.
I always think that when it appears that there's no more room to kick the can, these people are just so
Oh yeah.
creative, man. They can just keep.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, what do you think a major war or civil war would do? At least 4 years, maybe another 20 years, right?
Well, people would be too busy worrying about their own safety and
Surviving,
worry. Yeah,
surviving.
this is, and this is where another question I have pop in my head after this because everybody's talking about it. I believe at this point, and I've been sharing this. The big tech put Trump back in. Now,
Not the big tech,
who
not
is it?
big tech, the capital behind big tech,
Okay, so the Palantirs and the
the Praetorian Guard, right? The Praetorian regime, not the mob, not the techies themselves. They were instructed.
so you're saying like the Peter Thiel was instructed?
No, no, Peter Thiel's one of the money guys.
Okay, Elon's one of the money guys.
Elon, not really. Elon is a tech guy.
Mark Andreessen,
Mark
Zuckerberg.
Andreessen. Problem is the mob state went after the billionaire class. And
Well,
so the billionaire class who owns the infrastructure, who built the infrastructure, who owns the infrastructure, and you've got to understand most of these companies and way more of these investment funds that people think are backed by the CIA through InQtel, through forgive me, I can't remember. There's um, a private, quote unquote, private equity fund that's public private. It's 50, $60 billion. I can't remember the name of it right now. I sat down with Trump's head of it back in 2017, 18. It's what's the funds behind 500 startups and Y Combinator and half the frickin' VC firms. So there are factions in all things, including the CIA and the FBI, et cetera. But the only one that really matters here is the CIA, because CIA was, for all intents and purposes, and quite literally, created by Wall Street, the Dulles brothers, and others. And investment banking and private equity and hedge funds, all that came out of them, right? That's the money behind these big tech companies. And there's factions, but one of the factions said, and maybe more than one of the factions said, yeah, no, mob state, you're not going to take us down. We own you. Mob state has been running amok for so long. Do you think that they're worried about or frightened by the real money power guys? Do you think they're even worried? Do you think they're competent enough to even know who they're fighting? They'll burn the world to the ground believing that they're going to win.
So I want to back up a second. Do you think in 2016, then, as we're talking about elections, did they put Trump in 16, in your opinion?
Yes.
So then why did they get rid of him in 20 then? Did they hate him that much?
No, the other two factions, no, it had nothing to do with hating. The other two factions compensated. The other two factions, the other two resentful factions, basically the Marxists and the fascists, and let's not say fascists, Nazis. The Marxists and the Nazis came together and they beat the, quote unquote, responsibles faction in that engagement.
But big tech was the money behind big tech played a huge part in getting rid of him in 2020.
Factions, factions. It's all factional. And those factions are at all out war. And the responsibles faction finally realized over the last 4 years that they have to come together and they have to work together and they have to take on this fight. They still don't have a fucking clue what they're doing. They're still too fucking cocky, thinking that they're way too powerful and too wealthy, et cetera. They don't understand the power some little mealy mouthed piece of shit bureaucrat in some intelligence operation somewhere has to manipulate things or to kill people. Right? So we are in, and again, this goes back, I think you and I were talking this previously, and maybe somebody else. This fight that started in the 1960s with the death of the Kennedys is now come to its apex. And we don't know who's going to win, quite despite what your guest, Tom, says. We don't know who's going to win. Right? So this stuff that happened over the New Year's, it's all part of it.
So what do you think then the next step? Because for people that think that Trump's just going to get in here and fix everything at this
He may
point,
not be alive. Yeah, he may not be alive. See, I wrote about this, yesterday before the Sean Ryan thing came out, right? I wrote that thread called the deception problem, right? The problem that we have is we don't understand how far back and how deep the deception goes because we don't know how the game is actually played, right? The alternate reality fifth generation warfare game that's far older than the last few years. It's been going on for centuries, right? Some of this gameplay, some of this lies and deceptions, 400 years old, right? So first off, we don't genuinely know how the game is actually played. The second part is we don't want to accept how malevolent and evil some of our own guys standing next to us really are. Because then I might have to turn and kill him. And I like the guy. Or I've done work with him downrange somewhere. Right? Or because that leaves his family in a lurch. Or because that unleashes frickin' Pandora's box. So I'm going to give you an example of a problem that I had a conversation with Charlie Cleveland. Charlie Cleveland was the longest or second longest serving Green Beret in history. Lieutenant General Charlie Cleveland came in Vietnam, was still a commanding general, USASOC commander when I was over at C-11 in late 2013, I think he's when he left finally. And there was another one, a sergeant major with 19th Group, who actually was in Afghanistan with us in 2012. Not tactically, he was a lessons learned guy at the time. But he came in and came with Green Beret in like 71 or 72, and he was still in uniform until just a few years ago. But anyways, point is, I had this conversation with Charlie Cleveland, who was, a guy been around with even the founders of, Special Forces back in the 50s. He wasn't there, but he served with those guys later. And he was rolling out this thing called 7th Warfighting Function, the Special Operations Global SOF Initiative, et cetera. And it was all great stuff, right? But I had this conversation with him in Okinawa, range 17, 2013, I think, um, about the find, fix, finish cycle. You familiar with that? The F3 EAD cycle?
No.
Find, fix, finish, exploit, something, something. I don't remember. The only ones I care about are the first three. We have a fundamental problem conceptually, and I see this in startup companies that I was in, that I helped found, that I invested in. I saw it as an investment analyst for major companies and smaller companies, et cetera. We're really good at identifying a problem. We're pretty good at identifying problems. We're pretty good at, so that's find. And then we're pretty good at knowing how to solve knowing how to execute a solution. Finish. We fucking suck at the fix. How do you get from a known problem to all the complex, detailed stuff that you have to do so that you can actually finish? You can actually execute some kind of a strategy. We're horrible at it. So we run around identifying problems. We run around trying to do finishes. And we're totally oblivious to all this shit that's going on in this vast amount that's going on in the middle, where people are manipulating, controlling everything. Not because there's some big brain people with some big board, et cetera. That's not how that works, right? They're just, some of it's just people sowing chaos. Some of it's people just pursuing their career at any cost, or power, or accumulation of power, or fame, right? But in order to identify a problem and then get to an actual workable solution that you can execute, there's a vast amount of things that have to be worked out. And I'll give you an example from the targeting world, right? You get a photograph and you get a date and a place. Somebody's going to show up somebody. And we want to figure out if this is actually the person we're talking about. We want to figure out what their pattern of life. So we want to get positive ID. We want to get a pattern of life. We want to exploit their phones. We want to exploit their, put surveillance stuff up, run surveillance on them. We want to make sure we got the right person. We want to make sure we got the right information to justify, exercise and target. We want to look at their known, associates, known and otherwise, locations, map and track out everything they're involved in, et cetera, right? All of that to set up an actual finish of some kind. And that's not always kill, right? Sometimes it's kid, snatch and grab, trunk monkey them. Sometimes it's turn and exploit them, right? Sometimes it's let them run, but tag them so that we can go, get them to lead us to somebody else, et cetera, right? So finish isn't always, the cool guy, oh dark 30 kind of shit. There's a vast amount of work that has to happen from the point where you've picked that guy up on surveillance from the first point to where actually something happens, right? Vast amount. Sometimes it can take months and years to work all that out. And oh, by the way, that guy's freaking viability or importance in the world might have changed substantively while you're doing that. And you got to try and get approvals and command authorities and lawyers and all this other shit to allow you to do stuff. And you might or might not be in and out of hostile and semi-permissive environments. And you got to figure out, okay, so we finally figure out how to figure out this is the right guy. Then we do all the exploit to make sure we got the right information. We're doing the pattern of life stuff. We got to make sure we don't show up and we don't dirty it. And then let's say, okay, well, we're gonna capture the guy or we're gonna kill the guy. Okay, guy or gal, because we don't just kill men. Or capture them. It's like, okay, how are you going to get what assets you're going to bring in? How are you going to get them in? Whether that's the assaulters, the sniper observers, whether you got to bring some partner forces in, because maybe you got to bring some higher echelon assets, right? Or maybe you're handing over to them. You got to do routes of travel and alternate routes of travel. You got to look at, State Department shit, and people in the State Department are going to get in the way, and how you build those relationships. You got to work on country force, host nation people, and how you deal with that, and routes of travel to the country and out of the country and into the town or into the local area or out. And you got to do that under, everything goes right and shit doesn't quite go right. Shit doesn't go right. Shit really doesn't go right kind of conditions, right? You got to label buildings in certain ways for access points. Anyways, that's just the scratching the surface of all this fixed stuff you have to do. So that once you realize that somebody's a bad guy out there that you want to do something about, and you actually do something about them, there's this vast body of work that has to happen to make that possible. Okay. The amount of deception that can happen inside that in-between space is ludicrous. And you have to try and counter all that all the time so that you actually exercise the right target in the right way at the right time with the right signature, right? Getting your people on and off the, but everybody's safe, etc. It's a ludicrous amount of work. Almost nobody does it. Everybody thinks we just find a bad guy, we do some Jason Bourne stuff, and then we go kill him. Well, this is the problem, is that one, despite all the people we kill, most of that's bombing, by the way, right? We don't actually assassinate a whole lot of people. I mean, we do, but relatively, we don't really assassinate a whole lot of people. We coerce people, we convert, we do all kinds of other things, right? And a lot of times we just let them go because everything's changed, or we didn't do the fucking fix right, or we couldn't get authorities. God, I've seen that one so many times, right? Where somebody up the chain wouldn't approve it. But the point is that what makes the world run is not identifying problems and problem people, and it's not doing some cool guy stuff over here, visible or not visible. It's all that unbelievably complex work in the middle that nobody pays attention to, and where most of the deception is.
Well, and me, doing this show, I try to explain to people, and even for myself, it's so hard, and I pay attention to it all the time. I mean, I'm not, I'm not comparing myself being plugged into somebody like you or Luongo or Dave Collin. Dave Collin and I were talking about this too. He stepped away for a few days, and he's like, "You realize when you're gone for a few days,
yeah.
And if
I
you're
saw
just
his comment.
if you're just casual, you can't keep up with this."
Yeah.
And I'm paying attention. I can't keep up with it because in my mind, as it's been now, some time to reflect. Big tech. So I keep saying big tech, but you know what I mean with the financing. They put him back in. So a Cybertruck, a Tesla Cybertruck in front of the Trump Hotel, and people were saying, reading on X, oh, you got to keep Trump safe for the next 17 days or whatever for inauguration. I can't get my head. I'm missing something. And then also, to me, which I think they're connected, Elon going on the warpath, taking away people's blue checks, their ability to make money from subscriptions. And he's everywhere with Trump. He's everywhere with him. New Year's Eve again, I saw him at Mar-a-Lago. Thanksgiving, I saw him there. That is weird.
Oh.
And then J.D. Vance's ties to all this too.
If I wanted to make sure, if I was two of the factions and the other faction had gained an advantage, right? In this case, the public opinion and public supports, and won an election, and was saying all the things that was genuinely rallying the people behind them. What would I do if I was the other two factions? I'd let you know, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to kill your kid or your grandkid. Not, I'm going to take your money, I'm going to bankrupt you, I'm going to lawfare. No. I'm going to kill you. And I'm going to do it a horrible way. And oh, by the way, I have the capacity to do it. And if you survive that, I'll take us to war. I'll kill millions, billions.
Translate this for me because I'm missing something. in terms of these people, what is your instinct telling you then?
I suspect that Trump and Elon were approached by somebody in their network and others and said, okay, we'll let you do this. We'll let you do this. But if you continue on this, you continue on that, particularly not going to war with Iran, not going to war with China, we'll kill you.
Meaning they want them to go to war with these countries.
Correct.
Right.
Oh,
okay.
no, it's openly stated. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
right. Okay, I'm just making sure I'm
because
understanding
it's
you correctly.
the only way to keep the Ponzi scheme going.
Right.
And to not have all of this stuff come out in the light of what's been done to the American people and was being done right now to the European people and is planned for the US. It's the only way to keep it all from coming out into the open. Because if we start paying attention to our own country for the first time in over 70 years, we are going to start to see a whole lot of things that a whole lot of people, very wealthy, very powerful, very dangerous, and not wealthy or powerful, but very dangerous people don't want us to pay attention to.
And that will
And
make
unless we get a Caesar, right, that has his own armies, right, we got to understand history, the Praetorians. That's why I wrote about it. If we don't get men, strong, capable men, and their women, because they got to support them, who are willing to be killed to do the right thing, then all it takes is a whisper in your ear. That doesn't have to be a threat against your life. I'll kill your kid in a horrible way. Right? So as long as one side, one faction or two factions has the willingness, proven willingness to murder, and the response, so if the one or more of the resentful factions holds the license on the willingness and ability to murder you and your family and millions and billions if necessary, and you do not have the willingness to stand to the necessary things to stand to that, if not conduct it yourself, then they're in power. The ones willing to murder are and actively engaged in murder are in power. Fact.
Not that EM and I are calling for violence or anything.
No, not at all.
No, I just
not at all.
No, I know.
But,
I just if any algorithm is going to listen to this, we are not calling for any violence.
No. So here's the thing. You don't have to necessarily go out and conduct murder yourself. What you have to do is harden yourself against it, where you have to commit yourself to stay the course, even though that threat is there. And then you have to secure yourself and others around you in such a way that it makes it very hard to kill you. And or if you or one of yours does get killed, it is so obvious that it causes a reaction in the people to come to your defense.
And this is where people, I feel like the masses still, they
not just the masses, the leaders don't, these folks think that these institutions and systems are going to protect them. And I suspect very much that's what's happened, because you can hear the narrative change, et cetera, is that these conversations have been had. Why did Elon say he's got a knife stuck in the drywall of his bed, above his bed? The guy has the best security the world could buy. Who the hell was he talking to?
I didn't even hear that. When did that come out?
Oh, he put it out on a tweet yesterday. Yesterday or the day before. So I have said this before, and it's what I wrote, the mercenary problem, couple of other the threads, the threads, but really the mercenary problem is the big one. Most of these 99.999% of the security for these top level people come out of 3 or 4 organizations: CIA, some form of the CIA, Green Berets, Navy SEALs, FBI. And there's a spattering of other guys, but they've got overlap with those, right? You can't get those jobs if you don't come from those entities. So are those people in control? or are the institutions from which their security comes from in control? The institutions from which the security comes.
The institutions control those people that control the labor that provides
They don't
the
have to
service.
control them. What they are is, in the world of special operations and intelligence, and there's a huge overlap of those, especially with the Green Berets and the CIA, right? Because the Green Berets were founded to be the paramilitary for the, partnered with the intelligence community. The intelligence community was not supposed to have its own paramilitary forces. There's supposed to be a division there, specifically to prevent what's happened. It's not that they have to control you. And this is the thing I suspect from the show yesterday, the Sean Ryan show. It's not that they have to control you. You can be a free agent, but you're not going to have access to the community if you don't support certain things. If you don't set aside willing suspension, if you don't do willing suspension of disbelief and look the other way sometimes, and or when somebody approaches you and says, well, we want this information out, or we need this information on somebody, you don't do it. Then you're cut off, and now you don't have access anymore. You can't get another contract, and you're economically and culturally cut out. And you spent a decade or 2 decades or 4 decades building those relationships.
And now, Sean Ryan, he's gone dark on his Twitter handle, I think somebody said, or he hasn't been posting.
Well, that's what he said. He said operations. Somebody jumped up and said, well, Sean, I thought you were quiet. But I mean, he actually said, to his credit, he said, the operations will continue while I'm gone, so things will continue to be posted. So I'll give him that. And I don't know Sean at all personally. I know some guys that know him. I've never served with him. I've never worked with him. So I'm in no place to judge Sean or this other guy's Sam or whatever.
Sam
I've never
Shoemate.
worked with. Yeah, so I'm not here to judge or assess these guys, right? But they are part of a community, and that's the dirty little secret of our community. And I'm an outsider because I never relied on that, and I've never tried to get contracts. I never tried to get jobs through that. I never done contracting work. Not for any, reason that I don't, believe in the community and support it. Just, I didn't need that. Other guys needed that work, and there was other things I needed to do. And I got derailed for 5 years with, massive freaking brain injuries, where I could barely speak and walk for a couple of years. Doesn't mean I didn't do stupid things and make some piss some people off in that part, one of that community, like a lot of guys. But yeah, so I'm not here to judge these guys. I'm not here to say that they're lying or any of that. I think they're genuine guys. But the problem is we belong to a community that is the only real asset that we have. And I don't mean so much me again, because I've never made a living off of that post, right? And I have no intention to do so. But, for most of those guys, in whatever form or fashion, their only real asset is their trusted relationship with that community. And that's a threat. Now, it can be an extraordinary value because, again, there's factions. And if these guys are aligned with the right faction, and that faction decides it wants to take down the other two murderous factions, then that's an amazing value. But how do you know which one of these guys they are? The issue that I have right now is that these guys, these special operations guys and these CIA guys, they don't understand fix. And I know that from being operational years ago. They don't understand fix. And so it's too easy for somebody to come, like the Sam one, right? What was his statement? Sources. Not he had hands on or he was, right? No. Source south of the border, source north of the border. Okay, well, who are these sources? I'm not questioning him at all, right? At all. But the way in which we bring about a war that nobody wants is lies and deception. And how do you do that? You operate in this massive, complex gray area. And oh, by the way, when you're targeting somebody, they're trying to do counter targeting, if they're any good or they're playing at any sufficiency of the game, right? It's too easy to deceive and manipulate in that space. Good people, right? I mean, genuinely good people. And I know Green Beret in particular, whose name I won't mention, who's a very good man, who's done a lot of incredible things. But half the things come out of his mouth I know are not real. And I know it's not because he's lying in any form or fashion at all, but because of what he's been told and what he believed. And I know where he was, who told him, not specifically, right? But I know where the information came from and how it got to him. And he, in good faith, is acting on that. That's happening all over, by the way, not just in the special operations community or in the intelligence community. That's happening. I'm watching it with family offices where they're getting their information from, to make investment decisions and philanthropic decisions and multi-generational asset decisions. 70, 80% of the information they're getting is garbage. Garbage. To say nothing again of their security teams and, and who might be good guys, but who could be completely deceived. And I know about this from a guy down in Georgia who's, a billionaire that had his head of security telling the FBI everything that the guy was doing when he was trying to counter voter fraud. Legally, legitimately, not illegally at all. Right? So we can be deceived too easily. And unfortunately, way easier than a lot of other people can be, because we do have high trust in our community, right? Not with everybody, but there are some relationships that if I haven't talked to the guys I served with in years, right? But there are some guys that if they came to me, no matter how crazy what they said, I would definitely give them time to think it out and try it. You know what I mean? They would have access and I would listen and I would genuinely listen, right? And I would put resources into trying to figure out, right?
I think people need to come to terms with, and this is, what I've been saying, these institutions are beyond salvageable at this point as we come into this next administration. And I don't know what's going to happen. We just sat here for an hour and we're talking about, events that have occurred in the last week. And not that I or anybody else could have predicted that this was going to occur, but they're just too far gone, in my opinion.
They're committed. So give me a second. What we have to accept is that there is a generation that is aging out and dying. And from the time they were young, there were two overriding forces that have shaped their entire life, their purpose, that they have to accomplish before they die out. One is the Malthusian, the population bomb bullshit, that we were going to overpopulate and kill the planet. That's one. So what do we got to do? We got to depopulate, right? That's one group. Tied into that is the generation, and mine got the tail end of it, but is the generation that grew up with ever persistent threat of nuclear war every day and fear of nuclear war. And so they've got to destroy nuclear enemies so that there isn't that nuclear threat anymore. And those two overlap substantively. And and they're in power and they have the wealth, and they're that generation that has all the wealth and the power and the access and control. Now that's starting to shift, but we got another 15 years of that. And they are going to do everything in their power, and they are motivated by the belief that we have to kill, that half the population needs to not be here. So you match those two things together, and what you have is a genocidal generation that's going out and has to close out business. And what will they do And what will they manipulate? What will they control? And what will they deceive to bring this about? And then you've got the 31% of people who lie, cheat, steal, and murder for fun or by motivation and or fun. And you couple them together and you're in a very dangerous place as a species.
Are we in the most dangerous time right now? Even from you and I's initial conversations from a few months ago, has the temperature,
Yes.
the heat's intensifying?
Yeah. And it will only do so. And it doesn't matter if Trump gets into office on the 20th, et cetera. We're not done with this. This, and the all out fight, whether it's domestic and or foreign, it might not happen for 3 to 5 years. We can't say that. But this steady escalation, this steady move to all out slaughter and murder will accelerate, will broaden, will expand. I suspect it's probably not going to happen right away. They're going to try and get their war with Iran, I think, before January 20th. I don't know, but I suspect they are, or shortly after. It doesn't really matter. Um,
What would that mean?
but
Would that
this,
mean Israel would go in, or
no,
would it be
no, no, no,
proxy?
no. Israel can't push beyond what it's doing right now. No, it would be some kind of October 7th like event here in the U.S., blamed on Iran, maybe some others, probably blamed on, backed by Russia, et cetera. Maybe move troops into Ukraine and assault Iran.
The United States
So,
would. The United States would
yeah,
be the one.
NATO and the United States. So a total mobilization, a draft, all of it, right? Wartime economy, all of it. Um,
Be martial law? Do you envision something like that as well?
Possibly, yeah. So, and again, I'm not saying that, yes, these are all possibilities. And this is what the narrative's been, right? You can hear all of the narrative, right? And again, that whole Sean Ryan interview at the end is this performative theater thing about the Iranian man pads in the US. It's like, wait a second, that's a total freaking non sequitur. And the whole way they did it, they staged it. It's everything was like, they didn't give a damn about the dead team sergeant or maybe escaped dead team sergeant. This was all a setup to get us all paying attention, all interested in this very interesting thing. So then they can do this predictive programming about a surface to air missile attacks here in the United States. And oh, by the way, over the holidays, we had all these plane crashes that were all over the news, et cetera. That's also predictive programming. Tie those two together. What are we being told? There's going to be an Iranian strike on U.S. soil against aircraft. Maybe it's not the president's. Maybe they don't hijack aircraft this time. They shoot them down like 2001. So I don't know exactly, right? But if you listen to the narrative, if you're a targeting guy, where you're a fixed guy and you're a targeting guy and you're setting up a finish, which in this case would be some kind of war initiating event, this all fits that pattern. Now, is it the only pattern? No, because after 20 years of the GWAT, et cetera, and all the stupidness in the Ukraine, might not get another jihad. So then what do you got to switch to? White supremacy, whites, military is a threat, and civil war. They don't care which one it is. They don't care because what they need is they need us all distracted and killing each other, and they need to recollateral. They need to collapse the current financial economic system, and they need to recollateralize. And the only way to recollateralize is to steal assets.
That's where the David Webb, The Great Taken.
And you can steal assets in one of two ways.
Have you read
The
that
way
book?
David's talking. I haven't.
Oh.
No, but I understand what he's talking about. Absolutely. Right? Because we saw some of this starting 20 some odd years ago. There's two ways to do the great taking, and you do both. One, you do that, structural, and the other one is you just kill people off and then confiscate their assets, their collateral. So the thing for civil war right now is that they haven't fractured us enough yet. So that one, they could push for an Iranian, basically World War III anytime, anytime. All of that narrative crafting's in place. All of that alternate reality gameplay has already been leading up and pretty close to that, okay, as one of the branches in the alternate reality game. The Civil War one, I don't think's quite here yet. That could be 3 to 5 years away. And as some other folks have said, we might get both. What might wind up happening is they do the World War One. That destroys the West to such a degree that it launches civil wars at home. And that would take 3 to 5 years to happen. And I'll give you a prime example. Russia, 1917.
Explain that for people that don't know. Russia 1917.
Russia had its ass handed to it, 2.5 million dead or something. I don't remember the exact number. Forgive me. I probably should. So, but millions dead, immense hardship at home, supporting the war, withdrawal from the war, revolution. Fostered by the outside, by us, by the way, and the Brits in particular, right? But revolution, because of the destruction and the impoverishment that happened at home to fight World War I, the Russian people were willing to rise up, to follow the provocateurs to actual civil war become revolution. So we could have both. We could have a world war for 3 to 5 years that costs us so much, impoverishes so many people, brings in so much tyrannical control, so many dead, like what's happening in Ukraine. And people can argue all they want, but there's at least 700,000 dead Ukrainians and at least 3 times that amount severely wounded. It might even be higher. For a fraction of that, not inconsiderable though, but a fraction of that on the Russian side. Western nations go through that, and there will be civil wars. There will be revolutions in the West. Hell, there may be a revolution in Ukraine yet, but what's left with it depends on what happens there. There may be a fucking revolution in Ukraine soon.
I can't believe that hasn't happened. I can't believe it hasn't occurred yet.
Because we're in there. We're controlling everything.
What if you're on the other side? You're Iran or Russia right now. What?
Wall us off. They've already been doing it. We've been doing it to ourselves with the sanctions and military posturing and everything else, and the forcing the de-dollarization through weaponization. They're just walling us off.
What do you mean by walling us off?
Economically, physically, militarily, access to resources. They're literally walling the West off. A reverse Iron Curtain.
Oh, walling. Okay, I didn't know what walling meant.
Yeah. Forgive me. Yeah, so a reverse Iron Curtain. They're walling us off into our own little domain in the world so that we can implode and not bring the rest of the world down with us.
Isolating us.
Correct.
Yeah. So we suicide ourselves.
And I should say, they're not isolating us. They're letting us isolate ourselves because that's what's happening.
What do you say to people, they push back on you and I and say, hey, you guys are black-pilled, you have no solutions. It is what it is. Everybody attacks Whitney Webb on X, and I'm like, okay, what do you want her to say? Is butterflies a unicorn? Like, I don't, what are you supposed to say?
So that's a great statement, right? I'm not black-pilled at all. I actually, give me a second. It's like saying that somebody has been diagnosed with cancer and they determine they're going to fight it. I'm going to fight it. What, I'm not supposed to say that I have cancer? That it's stage 4? That it's in terminal? I black-pilled because I admit it? No, I have cancer. And I don't, for anybody listening, just because I'm bald, I don't have cancer. Okay? I'm not saying that, right? I don't want anybody to think, oh shit, he's got cancer. Yeah. Not that anybody would care, but
I would carry him. I would carry.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it.
Just, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
I think my daughter would and some other people. Uh, just because the body has cancer and the individual states I have cancer and I'm going to have to fight this cancer and there's some hard times ahead doesn't mean they're black pilled. In fact, that could be white pilled. It's I'm admitting that there is something very serious and dangerous and deadly going on, and I'm committed to addressing it and facing it and dealing with it. That could be a white pill. Not admitting the problem isn't isn't a fucking running around kumbaya bullshit or denial or cognitive dissonance. That's not white pilling. That's snorting fucking cocaine off of a disease-ridden hooker's ass. Sorry, guys, I didn't mean to. A little over the top there. I apologize.
It was appropriate.
Right?
I think it was appropriate.
So we have a problem. We have a major problem, and we can deal with the problem. We can go through the hardship. We can, right? Humans have been through these things before, and we can make it through. But we're gonna have to go through, right? So that's not a black pill to me or a red pill or blue pill. First off, stop taking fucking barbiturates. Snort cocaine. No, don't. Go back to the OG.
I gotta stop saying pill. This black pill stuff too, because I've now fallen under that.
Doesn't that come from the Matrix?
Isn't that come from the Matrix? Isn't that where that all started? Right?
I think so. I think so. I don't know, but the point for me is people stop taking pills. Go out, don't go to cocaine. Go out, touch the earth. Go skiing. I'm going skiing tomorrow, right? Go out, just do things, but stop taking freaking pills. I do want to, if I might, I want to touch on the Whitney Webb thing, because this gets to the fix, right? The find, fix, finish thing. I don't know Whitney at all, okay, and I don't really follow her. I have her books, One Nation Under Blackmail. She does really solid work. The issue that I have with Whitney. And that whole following. And this is how we get deception and how we manipulate people like that, right? She's being supported in her effort to call, and this gets to the Sean Ryan and some other things and things that people really need to understand. The only purpose of special operations and the intelligence community is deception. It is the only reason we exist, is to exercise vast, complex, ever-evolving, constantly maintained, fed deception. Now, ostensibly, that's to maintain power and safety and security, and in some cases it is. But it's easily, again, if you don't understand, which most of us don't in that community either, including the CIA guys, right? We don't understand the fix and how easy it is to manipulate when you have entire entities whose sole purpose is deception. It's too easy to deceive them, right? And so it's not a big deal to release information and help somebody kind of guide somebody to lay out some sins of our fathers after they're dead, or when they're too old for it to matter anymore, or when they're just not in power anymore, and whatever they did when they were in power doesn't fucking matter, because we're off doing this other deceptive shit, evil shit, right? So we'll call out our, what was the whole fucking church report? 74, 75, 77, whatever it was. That was the agency calling out their own sins while continuing nonstop. Well, the reason they allowed all that out there is because it didn't matter anymore. Right? The only way we could have addressed those things, and boy, we should have, but Kennedy had been killed over it. Eisenhower had been threatened over it. Nixon was removed for it, right? People have tried to address this problem. So The one thing that I have concern with Whitney and her group is what's called purity spiraling. Okay, so you see it, you understand it, you recognize what's happening, right? At a pretty good deep level. Problem is you don't realize you're being played to get everybody to go look over there. And anytime there's a discussion about a solution, one of the people or more of the people involved in that solution is on your list of bad guys, and so you won't want anything to do with it. Well, that's not how the world works. It's not how power works. That's not how families work. Right? If we were doing that, we'd probably kill 95% of the fucking human population because they're on somebody's, I don't want to work with that guy list. Right? So again, she's doing great work, as an aspect of this fix to get to a finish, but she has no idea how to get to. Well, I'd say she's fine. She's not fixed, right? She's fine, and there's got to be solutions over here, the finish side, and there's nobody able to put that together because most of the people around her are doing this purity spiral, where everybody's got to be pure. Or we can't work with them. It just doesn't work. And and we keep you there, not me, but the way we in the deception in the fixed world work, we keep you in that space. So you call that all you want. We'll never actually get to a solution. And I'll just keep feeding you with information. We do this with sources that we're running and handling, right? Or potential sources. So I'm a big fan of her work, by the way. So I want to say that, right? But for all the rest of us, we can't do purity spiral. I wrote the whole redemption thread too, right? The redemption problem. We've got to have, and redemption's got to be hard earned, right? I don't believe in forgiveness, by the way. I think it's a lie. I've never actually seen genuine forgiveness. I think it's a made up thing, right?
Explain that really quick. Why you don't believe? So if I wrong you, you don't believe in forgiving? Am I
I
understanding
don't think
that
it's
correctly?
possible. It's not possible. Physically, neurologically, it's not possible. Neuroemotively, it's not possible. What I can do is come to a place of understanding of why you did it in the complex space of you as an individual and why it happened to me in the complex space of who I am as an individual. And I can figure out how to make sure it doesn't happen again. Or if it does, how I can deal with it more quickly, right? Less destructively. But it's literally physiologically and neurologically impossible to forgive somebody. It is possible that somebody can redeem themselves, that they can prove that they are now beyond that behavior, right? That they've committed genuine restitution, not forced from the outside, but this is deep in Western culture and civilization. It's actually the bedrock of Western civilization is redemption, but it's hard earned. You're going to have to prove to me, it's not about me forgiving you. Bullshit. You could do it again tomorrow. But if you redeem yourself over a period of time through hard freaking labor, and it is hard in every freaking culture in the world, right, that believes in redemption, then we move beyond it. Right? Or you don't redeem yourself. I don't have to forgive you. I know that's a possible thing for you to do, and I just don't get myself into a position where you can never do that to me again. But we're going to have to not get in the purity spiral. We are going to have to really bring back and understand redemption. And we're going to have to give some people. And I'm going to tell you right now, one of the guys that's going to need redemption right now is Elon Musk. And what he's doing over this, people disagreed with him stuff. And I think he's getting instruction from other people too, by the way. So don't think that Elon, is this all powerful guy. Right? He's in 5 freaking national security industry spaces. He's got a massive security team, which come out of those, 5 entities, right? He could be snuffed out like that, or one of his many kids, right? In an instant. So he's operating within an environment too. He's not a freaking king that's, the, all powerful with a knighthood and, standing army around him. But he's going to have to do some redemption now too, because he got baited into something. And then he got bad advice as to how to respond, how to react and respond to it. Nobody's going to forgive him, but he can redeem himself by his actions.
Not seeing those so far.
Not seen him so far because he's getting bad advice, right? He's getting bad advice. This is the problem we have across the board. Not, security is one level, but this is a conversation I've been having with, very wealthy people in family offices, is the gatekeeper problem. It is the biggest problem that we have right now. And it's what may bring down Western civilization, is the gatekeeper problem. It's who do you get your advice from? And where do they come from? And what communities do they own loyalties and what community is their asset that they have to maintain that relationship? And is that beneficial to you? Are you getting, when I was doing my doctoral studies, one of the things that I learned very early on, and I have to thank one of my fellow PhD students and one of my professors, actually my lead professor, Dr. Murat Tanik. Dr. Tanik said, go find the source, right? Go chase down the source document, the source statement, and then take your research and work from there. And then I had another student, another Turkish fellow, brilliant, Serkan, I won't say his last name, brilliant. And, he reiterated the same. He was doing cutting edge stuff in software development for quantum computing, right? And we were having a very genuine series of conversations. And I asked him, where the roots was. And he's like, yeah, none of this stuff we're doing today comes from today. It all comes from documents, fundamental research from the 40s through the 60s. Go back there. Right? So the biggest problem that we have right now is the gatekeeper problem. People giving bad advice. They're giving advice for a world that doesn't exist anymore and realistically never really existed. But it was okay because we had so much cheap money. We could make so many errors. And we didn't have the physical threat of a hostile government that's got agents in your own household in the form of your security, right? But now we have those. Now we don't have the cheap money, and we'll never have it again in our lifetimes. And you do have those potential agents in your household, and you need solid advice. And even guys, the wealthiest man in the world is not getting that advice, is not getting that good advice because of his gatekeepers.
Where can people find you,
Puttering around my house, probably.
Skiing tomorrow.
Let's not tell people where that is. Yeah, or skiing tomorrow. Yeah. So I'm going to ski a lot this winter, actually. My daughter and I both love to ski. Yeah, Twitter is probably the best place. I'm on LinkedIn. I only go on there every couple of days or so just to check. Twitter is the best place. Till I get complete. So one of the things I noticed about Twitter for you and your crowd, I'd be interested to hear if you or others are having this. But one of the things I'm noticing on Twitter is that my content is being de-indexed. Meaning, if I go into Twitter, go into my profile, go to the search, and I search for a word string that I know specifically I put in, it won't bring up my content. It used to. It doesn't anymore. That's a sophisticated way on the data brokerage side to shadow ban somebody. You don't ban their content. You don't block their content. You de-index their content in the search results.
I've never noticed that. So you're saying if I just do a search?
Well, I'd be interested to see, because I've noticed it and so have some others, that like I was getting hundreds of thousands of views and hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of likes and comments, etc. Right? And then all of a sudden it went to tens of thousands, and then thousands, and every once in a while a spike here and there. I went in and several months later, I went and I started looking. I realized, what that means by being de-indexed is that the algorithms are not pushing your content around because it doesn't meet the profiles of the kind of content to drive the conversation. It means you've basically been silenced, excepting people who search you out. or that you show up periodically in their feed regardless because of the strength of the relationship between you, the engagement relationship. It's a way of shadow banning people without blocking their content whatsoever, or all you got to do. I spent 2.5 years in my doctoral studies looking at data brokerage, by the way. That's a great book called Chaos Monkeys. I recommend everybody reads, right? But I'd be interested in you, your audience, to see if other people are having an issue where they go into the search through their profile in Twitter and search for their own content they know they put in there, right? Word string, because that's how the indexing works and how the algos feed traffic around, et cetera, is actually on word strings, right? I'd be interested to see.
You have to check that, and I'm sure it won't be that long before we talk again. So, because as we know, things are not. I wish none of this was happening, but this chaos is not going to stop. And if anything, the carousel is only going to pick up. I mean, God only knows what will happen by tomorrow, this week. Do you think the inauguration will be smooth?
I don't know.
So you feel that way? You feel you don't know?
I honestly don't know. We're in that place right now where we can't know certain things. I can tell you what they're trying to do. They're still trying to kill him.
See, this is where I get
threatening his family.
This is where I get conflicted because of big tech putting him in. So where's the threat anymore? Just the other side?
Tech wasn't the threat. It was the other two factions in the frickin' Praetorian regime, the financiers versus the banks, because that's the big fight, right? Financial organizations versus the banks. Tom talks this very well, so do some others. That's the big fundamental. That's the Praetorians. And then you've got their mob state, faction cutouts that are at all-out war with one another. Literally armies on armies, in the shadows and in the open, all over the freaking world, battling this out. So the responsibles faction has kind of come together. Let's see if they get it together. Let's see if they actually understand what they're up against. Right? Tech is not a monolith. Banking, finance, the Wall Street is not a monolith. These are factions. And they're at all-out war. And it is winner take all. Right? This isn't sit down, negotiate, and talk it out. This is to the death.
Until our next chapter, EM.
It's good to see you, Mike.
You too. Mic drop.